Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the topics you're curious about, the sources you send us, and really unpack them together. It's kind of a shortcut to getting genuinely informed.
Exactly. And today, we're diving into something really compelling based on your interest. How sheer determination can tackle challenges that just seem, well, impossible.
Right. We're looking at the transformation of Delhi's government schools using excerpts you shared from Manish Sisodia, Shiksha, My Experience.
It's a fascinating case study, especially if you're interested in seeing how vision and, frankly, grit can make a huge difference.
And you've told us you want those aha moments, that deep understanding, but without getting lost in the weeds. So that's our mission today. Let's start at the beginning. What exactly were they up against in Delhi back in, say, early 2015?
Well, the source paints a pretty stark picture. We're talking about schools where classrooms weren't just neglected, they were described as crumbling and dirty.
Crumbling, wow.
Yeah, literally, some junkyards. Ceilings looked like they could fall in. Students often sat on torn mats, not desks, and blackboards were broken, often illegible.
That sounds incredibly difficult. How could learning even happen effectively?
It's hard to imagine. Labs and libraries weren't really functional either, more like dusty storerooms. And it gets worse. Sometimes classes were just held out in corridors, halls, or even under trees.
Under trees, so just chaotic.
Absolutely. The source likens it to a vegetable market. Noisy, disorganized. And here's something really telling about the initial state. The education department itself apparently didn't have basic centralized data. Things like how many classrooms existed, or playgrounds, or even reliable student numbers.
You're kidding. So they didn't even know the scale of the problem accurately.
It seems not an easily accessible way. Just gathering that fundamental information, even getting it digitized, was a huge first step. It really shows you data is key, even for the basics.
That's a massive hurdle before you even start fixing things. It underlines the impossible feeling, doesn't it?
It really does. And when they did gather data, it revealed some weird things. Like schools built miles away from villages they were meant to serve, even when there was space in existing village schools.
Leading to low enrollment, I guess.
Exactly. But then in other schools, you had the opposite problem. Massive overcrowding. We're talking classes with 80, 100, even more students. The source mentions one extreme case. 174 students in a single class.
174. How can one teacher possibly manage that? It's unthinkable.
Right. It highlights the sheer depth of the infrastructural and organizational mess.
Okay, so the picture's clear. Dilapidated buildings, chaos, lack of data, overcrowding. It sounds truly overwhelming. Given this, how did the government, this determined force we're talking about, even begin to think about change? What was the vision? The political will. That's a crucial point. The source notes that, education often gets sidelined politically. Results aren't instant. It's complex to organize. Decisions are centralized. Leaders might not have an education background.
Yeah, that sounds familiar in many places. But here, there is apparently a stark contrast. A clear goal was set. The chief minister, Arvind Kejriwal, is quoted as giving a specific directive. The education department must get the budget it needs.
Even at the expense of other things.
Yes, even if other projects had to take a back seat. That level of prioritization from the very top, well, that's where the political will really translates into action. It showed this wasn't just talk.
That is a significant commitment. Did the budget reflect that?
Absolutely. It wasn't just a small bump. The education budget jumped dramatically. Think about this. It went from about 12% of the budget in 2014-15, roughly 4,500 crore rupees then, to 25% of a much larger budget later on.
25%, wow.
Yeah, initially around 9,000 crore, and it kept growing as the overall city budget grew. And crucially, this wasn't a one-off. It was sustained funding.
Which means projects wouldn't just stall due to lack of cash, which happens all the time.
Exactly. That consistency was key to making sure the plans could actually be implemented. It showed real determination, financially backing the vision.
So the will was there, the money followed. How did that translate into fixing those crumbling schools we talked about? What happened on the ground?
They tackled infrastructure with a two-pronged approach. Build new schools where needed, and add classrooms to existing ones.
Okay, makes sense.
Now, building new schools meant getting land, and that involved the central government's Delhi Development Authority, the DDA. The source mentions the DDA had historically been, let's say, less than eager to allocate land for schools.
Bureaucracy hurdles. Always a challenge.
Right. But they persisted and eventually did secure some plots. At the same time, they launched what the source calls a war footing renovation.
War footing. Sounds intense.
It implies real urgency. They targeted 50 of the absolute worst schools first. Just get them fixed, quickly.
And the new builds.
That followed. Big plans. 8,000 new classrooms and 25 new schools in the first phase, then another 12,000 classrooms later.
That's a huge number of classrooms.
It is, and apparently ministers were personally involved, checking designs, ensuring quality. They focused on the basics, too. Fixing washrooms, getting proper green boards instead of broken blackboards, making sure every classroom got whitewashed annually.
It sounds very practical, very focused on the student experience. Not just grand gestures, but fixing the day-to-day reality.
Precisely. And even something seemingly small, like desks. Initially, they came from Tihar jail, but the output was low, quality maybe not great.
Okay.
So they made a call, despite some official hesitation apparently, to break that system and just buy better desks from the market.
A pragmatic decision.
Yes, and the source links this explicitly to something deeper. The modern look of the renovated schools, having proper desks. It was about student self-respect, trying to eliminate that feeling some government school kids might have had, feeling inferior to private school students.
That's a powerful point. The physical space really does send a message about value, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's foundational.
So infrastructure was tackled head-on. But schools are more than buildings. What about the people running them? The source talks about empowering principals.
Yeah.
How did that work?
Right. This was another key pillar. Traditionally, principals in these schools often felt more like administrators just pushing papers rather than educational leaders. So in April 2015, they gathered over 1,000 principals. The chief minister apparently laid down a challenge: make your schools the ones parents prefer over private schools.
A bold goal. How was it received?
Interestingly, the source mentions the initial response in terms of principals submitting vision documents was a bit limited, maybe some skepticism given the state of things.
Understandable, perhaps.
Yeah.
So how did they build that buy-in and actually empower them?
They took concrete steps, one big one, massively increasing the principal's financial power. From just 5,000 rupees to 50,000 rupees they could spend directly.
That gives them real autonomy to fix small, immediate problems.
Exactly. No waiting months for approvals for minor repairs. And then a really innovative move, they decided to hire dedicated estate managers for every school.
Estate managers, what for?
To handle all the non-academic stuff. Cleanliness, maintenance, repairs. This freed up the principals enormously.
So principals could focus on teaching, learning, curriculum, the educational core.
Precisely. Let them lead on education, not worry about leaky taps. They also gave principals authority to transfer up to 2 teachers a year within their school.
That sounds like it could be controversial.
It was. The source notes opposition and potential for misuse. But the idea was to give principals a tool to shape a better academic team, maybe as a deterrent, too.
Okay, so practical power. What about developing their leadership skills?
Big investment there, too. They sent principals for training at top institutions. IIM Lucknow, IIM Ahmedabad, and internationally. Cambridge University, places in the U.S., and significantly Finland.
Finland, renowned for its education system.
Right. Exposing them to different successful models. Plus, something called Jivan Vidya Shivir, life education workshops. These apparently helped shift principals' perspectives on the broader purpose of education beyond just exams.
So it was a multi-layered approach. Financial power, administrative support, and leadership development, both practical and philosophical.
You got it. A real effort to build capacity from the top of the school structure.
Makes sense. Now, what about the teachers? They're arguably the most critical element. The source talks about reestablishing trust. What was the situation there?
Well, the initial government view, according to the source, was kind of like teachers were just typical government employees, often overloaded with non-teaching tasks.
Like what?
Maintaining family registers, doing election duty, various surveys, stuff that took them away from the classroom.
Right, that happens a lot.
So a key decision was made. Relieve teachers of most of these non-teaching duties. Election duty stayed, but the rest, gone, despite apparently some pushback from bureaucracy.
That must have been a huge relief for teachers, more time to actually teach.
Exactly. And they also got rid of rigid, centrally mandated weekly teaching schedules. Teachers were empowered to create their own monthly plans. More autonomy, more professionalism.
Giving them back control over their craft.
Yes. And another fascinating thing, they involved teachers directly in creating new teaching materials. Guidebooks called Pragati.
Teachers creating their own resources.
Yeah, through workshops. Based on the official excerpt curriculum, but tailored by teachers for their students' actual needs. collaborative and practical.
That seems very empowering. What about the issue of guest teachers? That's often a big concern in government systems.
It was a large chunk of the workforce were guest teachers, lower pay, less job security. The government tried to make them permanent, but faced legal hurdles and issues with the central government.
Political complexities again.
Right. But they did take a major step. They brought guest teacher salaries up to par with permanent teachers and ended the stressful annual rehiring process that provided huge stability.
That's significant. Equal pay for equal work, essentially, and more security.
Definitely. Oh, and they also gave tablets to all teachers. Streamlining admin tasks, data collection, maybe accessing resources, using tech to make their lives easier and improve information flow.
Okay, so less admin burden, more autonomy, better resources, tackling the guest teacher issue. Steps towards rebuilding trust and valuing teachers.
That seems to be the goal.
The source also highlights something called the mentor-teacher program. What was that about? Sounds like teachers supporting teachers.
Exactly. The idea was that the system lacked a formal way for experienced teachers to guide and support their peers. So they put out a call. Who wants to volunteer to be a mentor teacher?
And did people volunteer?
Enthusiastically.
Yeah.
Around 1,200 teachers applied. It showed a real appetite among teachers to help each other grow.
That's impressive. What kind of impact did these mentors have?
The source gives some powerful examples from the mentors themselves. Things like rebuilding trust between the school and the local community.
How so?
Maybe by reaching out, explaining things, getting parents involved. Also, tackling student absenteeism, finding out why kids weren't coming, and helping find solutions.
Really getting to the root causes.
Yes. And empowering other teachers with new techniques, fostering innovation, bridging that gap between theory and what actually works in a bustling classroom, providing emotional support to students too.
Wow, so a very holistic role.
It seems so. Mentors talked about overcoming their own challenges to do this work and helping schools collaborate better.
What did the principals think?
Very positive feedback, apparently. So much so, they asked for mentors to visit more often. This actually led to the next step, creating teacher development coordinators, or TDCs, based in every school.
Embedding that peer support permanently.
Right, making it part of the school structure. It shows how one determined initiative can evolve and lead to systemic change.
That's a great example of investing in people leading to wider improvement. Okay, the final big piece seems to be parents through school management committees, or SMCs. How were they brought into this transformation?
This is really interesting. SMCs were technically required by law, the Right to Education Act, but the source says they mostly existed only on paper.
Just tick it a box.
Pretty much. So the Delhi government decided to activate them properly through actual democratic elections where parents voted for parent representatives.
Elections for potentially millions of parents. That must have been a huge organizational effort.
Immense, but they did it. And these newly empowered SMCs became, as the source describes them, a vital bridge.
A bridge between what?
Between the government's big vision and the ground reality in each school. They could flag problems like delays in garbage collection affecting the school, or a specific teacher shortage, and often get them solved faster than waiting for the bureaucracy.
So like local problem solvers.
Exactly. The source even calls them the education minister's eyes and ears, providing real-time feedback, cutting through red tape.
That sounds incredibly valuable.
And then came another big step, giving the SMCs financial autonomy, their own dedicated funds.
What could they use the money for?
Things like hiring temporary teachers if needed, small building repairs, funding educational activities. It made them, and by extension the principal working with them, much more effective.
Giving power to the people closest to the issues.
Right. And they also focused on making parents feel genuinely welcome. Little things like setting up volunteer welcome desks during parent-teacher meetings, the PTMs.
Making it less intimidating for parents, maybe.
Exactly. And the impact of these mega PTMs, these large-scale meetings, was reportedly transformative, built trust between parents and schools.
How so?
It opened communication channels. The source shares an anecdote about a girl whose mother wasn't very supportive of her studies. But after talking to the teacher at a PTM, understanding her daughter's potential, the mother's attitude completely changed. She became actively supportive at home.
Wow, that really brings home the power of that school-home connection. That one conversation changed things for that student.
It highlights how deliberately involving parents, treating them with dignity, creates a whole supportive ecosystem around the child.
Okay, so we've covered infrastructure, leadership, teachers, parents, a really comprehensive overhaul. But the source goes deeper. into the philosophy behind it, all this education model of coexistence. Can you unpack that? It sounds quite profound.
It is. This seems to be the philosophical bedrock. It stems from something called Jivan Vidya Shivir, life education workshops, inspired by a philosopher named A.N. Nagraj. The core idea is peaceful coexistence.
Coexistence
Rather than the intense competition that often drives traditional education. Initial workshops were held with education officials to really think about what's missing, what do we aspire to? And they landed on this model focused on collaboration and mutual well-being.
So shifting the fundamental goal.
Yes. The coexistence model emphasizes internal competition, striving to be better yourself, but externally the goal is collective flourishing.
Interesting. What does that look like in practice? What are the expectations of someone educated under this model?
The source outlines 5 minimums after, say, 20 years of education. 1, self-confidence genuine, not based on comparing yourself to others.
Yeah.
2, good health, holistic well-being. 3, living prosperously with family prosperity, meaning more than just money. 4, amicable relationships. And 5, contributing meaningfully to society.
Those are broad, life-oriented goals. How does the source argue the current system falls short?
Well, it critiques the current system's ability to truly deliver on these. Does it build real self-confidence or just confidence based on ranking? Does it promote holistic health? Is prosperity just about wealth accumulation? Are relationships truly harmonious? Is societal contribution just about individual gain?
It certainly makes you think about the deeper purpose of schooling.
It really does. The source digs into what it sees as problematic assumptions in the dominant model, stemming from, well, misinterpretations, it argues.
Like what?
Like economics focusing on unlimited wants, or evolutionary studies overemphasizing survival of the fittest as the only driver, or psychology reducing motivation just to fulfilling desires.
And the coexistence model tries to counter these.
Yes. It says education should help students understand themselves deeply, their connection to others, their place in nature. It stresses understanding intrinsic value over just monetary price, and promoting sustainable living, harmony with the environment.
So it's broadening the scope of education significantly.
Hugely. Beyond just jobs or poverty alleviation, the source suggests this kind of education has the potential to address massive global issues: world peace, climate change, social conflict.
That is, a remarkably ambitious vision. How did this philosophy translate into actual programs in the schools?
2 major initiatives are highlighted as direct results: the happiness class and the entrepreneurship mindset curriculum, or EMC.
The happiness class got a lot of attention, didn't it?
It did. Apparently it started from a simple question from the chief minister: how do we make better human beings?
A fundamental question. What does the class involve?
3 main things. 1, mindfulness meditation to improve focus, manage emotions. 2, inspirational stories to get students reflecting on their own thoughts, reactions, values. And 3, activity-based discussions analyzing thought processes, understanding behavior.
And did it work? What was the impact?
The source shares anecdotes suggesting really positive effects. Students becoming more self-aware, understanding emotions better, changes in behavior at school, and even influencing their families positively at home.
So focusing on emotional and ethical development alongside academics. What about the EMC, the entrepreneurship mindset curriculum?
Right. This tackled the common issue of students mostly thinking about getting a job after school, a job seeker mindset.
Instead of potentially being job creators or just more proactive in general.
Exactly. The EMC wasn't just about starting a business. It aimed to build confidence, encourage innovation, develop an entrepreneurial attitude, problem solving, taking initiative, resilient skills useful in any field.
So a broader mindset shift.
Yes. They did extensive pilot testing, refined it. The focus shifted from just how to start a business to how to think like an entrepreneur in whatever you do.
That sounds like a really valuable life skill. Okay, looking ahead, the source mentions this is all ongoing work. What's the future vision?
Yeah, it emphasizes the first 5 years were about building the foundation. There's still work to do. Things like promotions for officials, filling principal vacancies, fully resolving the guest teacher situation, getting more teachers overall to reduce workload and allow for more training.
So consolidating the gains and addressing remaining challenges.
Right. But they're also looking forward. They reiterate the positive signs from the happiness class and the early stages of EMC.
And future plans?
Some ambitious ones. Having the curriculum load, integrating more concepts into happiness and EMC. Restructuring the department into smaller zones for better management, and maybe allowing schools to specialize. Reforming exams to focus more on understanding, less on rote learning.
Moving away from just memorization.
Yes, establishing a distinct Delhi education board with a more practical, relevant curriculum, one that also helps with competitive entrance exams, which was a gap, and creating new specialized universities for teacher training, applied sciences, sports.
Wow, still aiming high.
Definitely. The source ends with a hope, really, that education becomes and stays a central point of political focus because that's seen as the driver for continued progress.
It certainly paints a picture of sustained determination, not just a one-off fix. So let's wrap this up. We started this deep dive wanting to understand how determination can make the impossible possible. What's the core message from this Delhi school's story?
I think the core message is exactly that. The initial situation looked incredibly bleak, almost hopeless, dilapidated schools, systemic chaos, lack of basic information. But through sheer focused determination backed by political will, resources, and a willingness to innovate at every level, they achieved remarkable change.
It wasn't just one thing, was it?
Not at all. It was fixing the buildings, yes, but also empowering the principals, trusting and supporting the teachers, bringing parents in as partners, and crucially rethinking the very purpose of education with things like the happiness class and EMC. The leadership, as represented by Manish Sisodia in this source, showed that a relentless focus on fundamentals combined with bold new ideas can overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable. It really is a powerful case study in determination driving breakthroughs.
Absolutely. And for our listeners who came wanting to see that connection between determination and results, this story provides a vivid, real-world example. It shows it can be done, even against massive odds. So here's a final thought to take away, inspired by this deep dive. Considering the comprehensive approach in Delhi, touching everything from infrastructure to philosophy, what aspects of this transformation resonate most with you? Where in your own life or work might you be facing a challenge that seems impossible right now, but where truly determined, perhaps multifaceted effort could potentially unlock significant positive change?
That's a great question to reflect on. Maybe think about the different elements, the structure, the people, the mindset shifts, and see what sparks an idea. How could that determination be applied? We really encourage you to mull that over.
Thank you for joining us on the deep dive today. We hope this exploration was insightful, and we look forward to our next deep dive together.